Any questions?
Yeah, if I may ask one. The thing that immediately springs to my mind is how and I'm sure you'll have the answer, is the authorities in terms of money laundering, because you're obviously disintermediating the transfer, your explanation of the cash, you're getting rid of the middleman.
Yeah.
The middleman, I suppose one could argue, that the authorities would argue that they serve a purpose in terms of not the smaller transactions, the pounds here and there. It's the larger transactions that opens itself up to obviously the criminal activity of transferring large amounts of money across continents. How do you think they will? How are they sort of looking at this, and how are they feeling about this sort of lack of transparency of transfer of funds?
Well, there is a huge clash growing, and it's not just this. There is a huge clash coming between authorities squeezing and free market booming, and people not wanting to be squeezed that much. And I think it's not just to do with money. I think people, the way I think people can feel there's a battle going on, and the nations that are going to do the best are going to be the nations where the authorities get their regulation right, and the nations that suffer are going to be the nations that get their regulation wrong. George Osborne has made it very clear that he is keen. I mean, among the Bitcoin community, and I bow to some of you guys, but I think Osborne's stance is kind of considered to be one of the more enlightened stances, and there's a lot of frustration in the US that they're not getting their regulation right. But the problem is nobody quite knows what is going to happen, and the problem that regulators have got is that they don't really know what to do. And you'll probably see something similar that happened with the internet. Sometimes regulators will be a little bit ahead of the game. Most of the time they'll be behind it. Sometimes they'll get it wrong, but most of the time people operating in this sector are just going to be so far ahead of what the authorities are doing that I don't think it's going to be too big a barrier to progress. The Bank of England yesterday, by the way, had a big conference and made some very kind of bullish noises about this kind of thing, and I know for a fact that I know quite a lot of people who work for the Bank of England. If you follow their Twitter feed, they're absolutely obsessed with Bitcoin and they think it's fantastic. So
there's an interesting analogy between this and what's happened in America in the gaming market.
Yeah.
In them opening up regulation of the game market and online gaming, and I think it's quite an interesting sort of comparison, because the thing that will drive it in America will be the tax authorities, I think, because the thing that again springs to mind here is that the tax authorities at the moment, through the banks, have access to transfer of funds. If they need to check up on people. With this technology, there is a free movement of cash, and it will be that to me which will drive the authorities, into how they're going to approach the regulation. It's about the transfer of large amounts of money, and we've all heard about HSBC in recent days.
Yeah.
It's going to be that side of things that I think, particularly in the States, will make them probably move ahead with this probably a lot slower than perhaps they will in other countries.
But that sounds about right. Yeah.
So it's not just money; it's information as well. Because you said DVLC.
Yeah. DVLA.
DVLA, rather. Yeah. DVLC is something different. But that is something that I would have thought that the government would want to. They wanted that privatised to such an extent that they wouldn't have access to it.
Well,
so it's not any money; it's information.
Yeah. Well, it's a very good way of recording. You make a very good. You both make very good points, and what I would say is there is a clash coming, and the gaming analogy is a good one. And then you make the point that it's not just about money; it's about information, ownership, and record keeping. And so, there isn't just one blockchain. There's hundreds of different forms of blockchain can be developed. And in the case of the DVLA, I don't know how that organisation works, but I imagine, eventually motor vehicle ownership will be recorded on a blockchain, and the information in that blockchain will be visible to the blockchain is totally transparent. It doesn't protect information, but it is it is private in the sense that only the sender and the receiver know who they are. Does that make sense? So you can go on the blockchain now and you can see every single Bitcoin transaction that has ever taken place, no matter how small or how large, and you can see when it took place. What you don't know is who sent the money and who received it, but those people know that. And so the DVLA will know about the ownership, and you will know about the ownership. I'm not explaining it very well.
If I may,
Hakim
actually,
is
regarding the issue that you're raising with money laundering, the blockchain is the most transparent payment system, and it's not anonymous, it's pseudonymous. So essentially, you can see all the large or small amount of money being transferred across different users. As far as pseudonymity is concerned, if you communicate your blockchain, your Bitcoin wallet address to someone via email, the government probably knows who that address belongs to. So it becomes very difficult to indeed be completely anonymous on the blockchain, and that's why the FBI was able to crack down on the illegal Silk Road's drug market thing that's happened last year. So really, the blockchain is the worst place for criminals to conduct activity because everything is just visible for everyone for the rest of time. Now, when it comes to the DVLA, I think that's we could see a period in time in the future where people are being given the opportunity to have in their homes a computer. That computer would enable the overall country-wide system for DVLA to be running, so in a form of like public-private kind of environment, in the same way that Bitcoin has those computers mining, so securing all the transactions. You could have as well people having the ability to have in their homes little computers, and by having those computers, they will get a little profits on a regular basis from providing the service to the whole country. It would be voluntary as well, and the government could be behind the scheme, but everyone around the country would be able to actually participate in the scheme.
But it will be a much more effective, clearer record of knowing who owns cars and what transaction of that ownership has taken place.
Just a couple of brief questions. One is connected to the discussion we just had. I guess the inland revenue are going to be the driving force to a certain extent behind this new technology sort of really getting to the forefront, because ultimately people trading in cryptocurrencies, otherwise they're not going to be declaring on the tax returns any profits they're making on transactions. So I guess the revenue are going to have to get to grips with this fairly soon, and that to a certain extent will, and obviously Osborne is behind it as well. I think I could see that cycle in terms of driving this to...
It's a bit like being a freelancer or being a company. The onus, the responsibility is on the freelancer to declare the profits and losses that he makes. And the risk that the freelancer takes on by not honestly declaring the profits that he makes is investigation. So what you will probably see as this thing grows is some high-profile bustings of somebody who hasn't properly declared their earnings in order to put fear out there on other people to be more honest.
And the second very quick question. If you look at the internet, you said in the late 90s really sort of kicked off and started in terms of people being aware of it, and it took about 10 to 12 years before it became more absolute mainstream and, as you said, plateau of productivity. Do you see the same sort of time horizon with this, i.e. 10, 12 years perhaps before we get to the plateau of productivity?
For Bitcoin, well, yeah, I guess so. Something like that.
Okay.
Sorry, not for Bitcoin, for blockchain. Yes, I do for blockchain. But I mean, these kind of cycles are very arbitrary, and you can put them over something that's happened and then change the duration of the cycle, or there's all sorts of little. It's just a kind of broad guideline. But in terms of, I would suggest Bitcoin is somewhere there and blockchain tech is somewhere there. We may never get this with blockchain tech. I don't know, but I happen to think that will happen. And I mean, I'm not saying it'll be as big as .com. I don't think anything will ever be as big as .com, because that was just enormous. But it is still potentially very big.
Any more questions?
Dominic, would you rather have an ounce of gold or the equivalent of Bitcoin?
I would rather have an ounce of gold.
Why?
Was that a trick question?
I know Dominic's a big gold bull, so testing.
But I would rather have a balanced portfolio.
Good answer.
Right answer.
The next question is, would a balanced portfolio have a Bitcoin in it?
Well, a friend of mine who works actually for HSBC, and but he's a crypto nut. He argues that it's a new asset class. So in the same way that gold, you could argue gold's a commodity, you can argue it's money, but really it's kind of an asset class in itself. And he thinks crypto, whether it's blockchain tech or Bitcoin or whatever it is, it's just a new asset class that's emerging.
You could, of course, argue you can put gold on the blockchain. You can combine
Well,
the
that's
two possibilities.
that is another thing that's being developed. There's all sorts of means by which ownership of gold is recorded on a blockchain, and people can just use gold as a vehicle to buy and sell stuff, or just transfer ownership. Hello, sir.
Question. I haven't quite got my head around the price of a Bitcoin because, to me, the price of anything is based on supply and demand, and there has to be a finite amount of a currency, gold, whatever it happens to be. Although obviously you keep mining for gold at the moment, there's a finite amount that's actually being taken out from the ground. With the Bitcoin, I mean, am I right in thinking you can basically just keep just printing money, basically?
No, you're not right.
Is there a finite amount?
There is a finite amount. The guy who developed it, and by the way, I got kind of obsessed with it when I wrote this book, and I think I've worked out who he is. And he's an incredible. If you go back and read his blog, he's massive. A, he's a massive gold bug, and B, he's a huge student of money. He was from George Washington University, and written all sorts of papers about the history of money, and as well as being a technological genius. And he actually developed something prior to Bitcoin called BitGold. And I spoke to him at great length about Bitcoin, about BitGold. But really, I was asking him about Bitcoin, and I was saying, what motivated you to develop BitGold and all this kind of thing. And he wanted Bitcoin is a deflationary system of money, in the sense that there is a finite amount that can be created. It's not like government money that, there's no restriction on the amount of debt that can be created, so therefore there's... Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, it is inherently inflationary in the sense... Let's not get down the inflation deflation. There aren't the same limitations on the amount of fiat money that can be created. You're going to have to tell me the numbers, Hakeem, but the eventual number, maximum number of bitcoins will be 21 million bitcoins.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
the year is 2140.
2140, and we're currently at 13.9 million.
Yeah, we've passed half.
We've passed halfway, so there's another 7 million to come.
So with the finite amount, effectively, that's where the pricing goes in, because basically the more the demand, the
exactly.
Price,
if more users come to the market than bitcoins get mined, then the value of a bitcoin will
increase. If I'm holding bitcoins, isn't that a concern for me that I could be, because with currencies, if I've got a load of pound notes stashed in my box at home, a tin at home.
Yeah.
I know pretty much, next week there might be a little bit of movement there, but it's going to be, micro sort of movements. Whereas with the Bitcoin coins, if I had those, say 1 month, in the wrong month, suddenly I could find my Bitcoin could be up massively or down massively.
It's up, I think, 15% just this morning.
That would be a big worry for me.
It is
losing big amounts of money.
It is very volatile, and that is the nature of the beast. And it will get less. As time goes by, it will get less volatile. But at the moment, it is extremely volatile.
It's a liquidity thing at the moment. There aren't simply enough people in this space to actually create the liquidity that you would expect from a mature currency. And that's symptomatic of where we actually are right now. So you don't expect an 8-year-old.
So where are we in that cycle then? Are we still on the peak of inflation?
And Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean,
I think we're somewhere down here.
You think we've moved down there, but then if there's
it's completely arbitrary.
Yeah. Could we not be on the next peak because
that's a good point actually. That's a very good point.
Because finite amount.
It's very fractal in the sense that if you look at the price of Bitcoin back in the that's 2013 massive spike to 1,200. Before that, the massive spike was at $260, and everyone, after the price went back down from $260 quite dramatically back to the $100, everyone was talking about, that's the end of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is dead. And then another peak came through, and then it crashed again, and everyone is like, the currency is crap. But let's wait and see in a few months what happens as more and more people are adopting this technology, whether we are going to try and see and break that $1,200, and I don't know where it will go from there, but it'll probably crash again, and again people will be saying, oh,
Who's
it's the end of the
deciding
business.
how much gets minted then?
This gentleman
Well,
here.
that's kind of partially. I would say, why can't you have more Bitcoin than the numbers you suggested?
Because the guy has programmed it like this, and he wants a deflationary system of money whose purchasing power increases. What I forgot to say is, as a gold bug, he wanted Bitcoin to be the kind of gold standard on which other currencies
So
would
then
be.
it's more likely then that other creative people are going to create impeccable, whatever you call them, as well.
Yeah.
Create alternative coins where you can have a much greater amount. Otherwise,
That's already happened.
the demand for Bitcoin goes through the roof, and
Yeah.
you won't be able to trade it.
That's already happened. There are, I think, 300 other different cryptocurrencies.
And Bitcoin represents about 90% of the market
Mhm.
still. Because
Yeah.
it seems to be able to maintain its position because it's the one with the first mover advantage, and I don't know if it's got the most integrity. But what would you say?
As far as I'm concerned, the reason why Bitcoin has kept its strength is because of the sheer size of its security network. So the total number of people who put their computers online to secure the transaction through the mining operation. That power, computing power, is so big that for someone to bring another currency online and to make it as safe as Bitcoin takes a lot of adoption from a very large audience in order
Like
for.
PayPal, really, isn't it? Effectively, it's first mover advantage. With
Yeah,
PayPal.
yeah, in a way, yeah.
And
Surely
you-
it's contrary to what the original founder wants. If he's limiting the amount, the value of Bitcoin will go up enormously. It will make it much more expensive for people to carry out the transaction.
It should be pointed out that there's 21 million Bitcoin, but they're divisible by up to 8 decimal places. So there's 2,100 trillion digital units in the 21 million network.
Yeah.
You don't have to just
The
have
smallest
one
being a
Bitcoin.
Satoshi,
Yeah.
which is after the pseudonym of the guy. who
Well,
did it.
sorry.
No, I was going to
yeah.
say exactly that.
Yeah.
So the figures you're quoting, the $1,200, $2,600.
Yeah.
What is that one Bitcoin?
That was for one
Which is
Bitcoin.
then divisible by
8 times.
8 times.
To
No, not
to
8 times, to 8
decimal
decimal
places.
places.
Decimal places.
So 100 million units per Bitcoin.
So there's a tiny amount.
Next question.
So the computing power,
Yes. No. You.
okay, so the computing power behind the Bitcoin currently, it's because you have this huge network of people doing it, and part of the reason for the price crash is because there's so many people that have come online and created new Bitcoins that they're selling them at a loss. Is that to some extent correct?
Well, yes, it is.
Yeah. So how does that
I mean,
apply
the
to
reason for
blockchain?
the reason the price has fallen is there's more sellers than buyers. But yeah, mining is I deliberately didn't open the can of worms that is Bitcoin mining when I was explaining it. But at the moment, the companies that mine Bitcoins, I think, are mostly making a loss, and they have to sell their Bitcoins, or most of them, as soon as they mine them. And so, I mean, that won't last forever, one hopes. But yeah, I mean, more sellers than buyers was the reason the price fell.
And do you need that same amount of computing power for the blockchain technology to work?
I'm going to pass you over to Hakeem, but basically, the more computing power there is in the system, the better it is.
Okay.
Yeah, it is very much. Yeah, the safer it is, the more difficult it is for anyone to try and compromise the integrity of the database. Now, of course, the price correction that we saw from 1,200 to where we are now is because there were more sellers than buyers. But also, I think we must remember that whenever there is a very quick acceleration in the price of any assets, we should expect a very strong correction following that movement. So for me, it's a normal thing. The price should not have gone so high so quickly. This was just a lot of Chinese buyers who love gambling, speculating on the price of Bitcoin and pushing it high until the central bank in China said, "Oh, hey guys, hang on a minute, what are you doing?" And then boom, the price went back down again. So that was really the trigger that brought the price back to a reality level, when the Chinese central bank said to the people in China, "Be careful, this is a dangerous speculative asset. We don't want people to get burnt."
It was a mania.
It was.
But I think, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but the majority of trading of Bitcoins takes place in China. You'd think it would be the US, but it is actually China.
Yeah, there's a bunch of people in China who enjoy trading bitcoins and also in America, I suppose. Yeah.
No, but I think it's something like it's over 50% of daily Bitcoin trading volume comes out of China. If you want to gamble against those guys, good luck.
Gentleman at the back, you had a question.
So blockchain technology allows you to decentralize these transactions, but where is it stored, and who has the responsibility of maintaining it?
Okay, the simple answer to that is the who has the responsibility of maintaining it? A database takes a great deal of maintaining. And the way the database is maintained is effectively you download the Bitcoin software onto your computer and run it. And the more people that are doing that, that is what maintains the blockchain. Now, of course, that consumes a lot of electricity, a lot of computer processing power. There's absolutely no reason for anyone to do that except for charity. So the device that Satoshi came up with, and it's quite kind of Ayn Randian, is that in exchange for running the software on your computer and maintaining it, you would be rewarded with new bitcoins. And that is basically the process of mining. And so people acting in their own self-interest, in other words, the hope of getting more bitcoins, actually run the network for the greater good of the Bitcoin community. So the whole thing is self-reinforcing. So the answer to your question is, miners maintain the network or maintain the blockchain.
So what happens when all the bitcoins have been mined? What's the incentive to
what
continue?
happens then is that in exchange for running the blockchain and maintaining the blockchain, you will be paid a small commission on each transaction that takes place.
I don't know if it was made clear, but although there's a maximum amount of Bitcoin that will ever be in existence, there is a fixed progression in terms of actually how many are allowed to be mined in any period of time. So if perhaps you can explain that a little bit more clearly. Going up to 2140, when the final Bitcoin is mined, that progression gets harder and harder to mine and becomes scarcer and scarcer. So it's not a matter of like maybe 3 million could be mined in a week. That can't happen. There is a fixed progression.
I'm not going to explain it any further because the problem with Bitcoin mining and the whole thing, it is a total headache, and you do not need to understand how it works no more than you need to understand how the internet works or a car works or anything. You do not, in order to buy and sell a car, you don't need to know how the car works. Just don't go there is my advice. Ladies and gents, it's an absolute pleasure talking to you. I have to go now, but thank you very much for listening to me, and enjoy the rest of your day.